Strikes and more strikes. Is the UK going back to the 1970s? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here is the thought for this episode.
Striking up a conversation. Strike 1. When a union strike stretches your pocket, economic problems soon skyrocket. Strike 2. When negotiations just clash and derail, the whole relationship will simply fail. Strike 3. When both sides are on very sticky wickets, they start to punch one another's tickets. Strike 4. When bruising banter finally hits the buffers, it's a fast track where everyone suffers. Clergyman Pete, why is everyone going on strike?
Well, it seems to be just generally over salary, not being paid enough. I know that some companies ended up having a pay cut because of all the lockdowns going on, and there wasn't enough income coming in. Therefore, they ended up having effectively a pay cut. I think the British Airways had a 10% pay cut, which was introduced, and that's may cause a strike there. But generally, salaries are not keeping up with inflation, which is increasing and getting out of control. In fact, it may be an exponential increase as we go forward. Certainly, already people's pay in real terms in various different industries has gone down, and so they don't have enough to live on, Mark. That's why they're going on strike.
Yes, this seems to be the biggest issue, isn't it? And it's not just the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers, which we've seen go on strike. But you're right, some of the staff at BA are also considering going on strike. But here's something else, folks. Yes, even the teachers' unions are starting to think about, well, should they go on strike as well? Well, what's simply happening is that inflation is eroding people's pay. The fact is that the money that you have left in your pocket is not covering the cost of inflation. So I'm sure that many people have been going into the supermarkets realizing that the foods that they buy has gone up, possibly even goods they buy online, whether it be clothing or other things. So we're seeing an unprecedented increase here. Now, what I will say is as you saw from the title of our show, are we really going back to the 1970s? We saw raging inflation in the 1970s, so much so that house prices increased dramatically, goods increased, and then we saw the inevitable. Yes, many people went on strike over pay. We had the 1970s, of course, we had the miners' strike, but we also had other industries. We had strikes in the car industry and many others. Steel and so on. Now, the thing here is that we're seeing something common. Now, what I would also highlight here is what I think the government needs to think about is how they negotiate with different unions. Unions are not as powerful today as they once were in the 1970s, but they are powerful enough to disrupt the economy. We've already seen that, of course, with the RMT. They've disrupted people going on holiday. Businesses haven't been hit, well, I'd say pretty badly, of course, for those trying to travel. I mean, we've even seen the fact that events have been stymied with the fact that people can't travel anymore. And even Glastonbury and many other events, even your little hero, Ed Sheeran, doing concerts.
My little hero, yes.
People can't get to his concerts. What's the world coming to? Now, here's my thought, Clergyman Pete.
Yes.
Is it just simply a financial matter? Because let's be honest, the country has a massive debt. It can't just simply keep printing money just to pay people off. That just economically is a nonsense. There's got to be a break point. And I think that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the United Kingdom, has a dilemma here because he's inherited now this situation that he has instigated, dare I say, rightly or wrongly, where we've now come to this point where raging inflation is upon us. What is the solution? Is it that what he should be saying to union workers, hold it out, let's see what we can do, and let's see whether we can start to trade our way out and just take the pain in the short term? Or is it a case of just simply a one-time, one-off payment just to help people through this time? So, for example, is it about things like reducing, say, VAT on certain types of goods and things like that, just to help. And we were seeing things like petrol go up dramatically. But on things where it's a case of whether do you eat or do you heat with your family, I'm afraid we've got some really tough times ahead. What do you think is the best solution?
Obviously you're the business expert here, a businessman, Mark. But just to give my opinion, and then you can say what you think again afterwards. So I think the way I look at it is this: making one-off payments just isn't going to cut it. I know that British Airways say they'd offered a payment to cover the 10% loss, but that's a one-off payment. I think these things are made worse by the fact that the bosses in such companies still seem to get their pay increases, and that's rather galling, and it causes.
Yes, quite.
I think that the striking is not going to achieve anything because there's a real problem there. They really don't have the money to pay.
Right.
Now, you can, of course, keep printing money or what they sometimes call quantitative easing, increasing the amount of money available. Now, that allows more money to be given, so the government could intervene and give money, some temporary payments to ease people through this hopefully temporary period. But that will make things worse because it is the quantitative easing that is at the heart of the inflation in the first place. Inflation at its heart is an increase in the amount of money available, or each unit of money be worth less, the same thing. Now, back in the 1970s, the end of the 1970s, the Conservatives came into power with the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and introduced a monetarist policy in which the money supply was controlled. Yeah. And you didn't go for this quantitative easing. But if you do that, of course, there's less money available, and you end up with a lot of people losing their jobs, and unemployment was then a problem under her tenure. So a solution in that case of controlling the money supply will make things worse with people actually losing their jobs. However, I don't see my opinion is there is no way around it.
I've got some solutions. I've got some offers. It's not going to solve the problem.
No, just before I hand it back to you, but I think that the way to solve this, is to try and grow our way out of it, grow business out of it, which means cutting regulations and cutting taxes on business. That's my opinion, for what it's worth.
So here's what I say then. So I think the government can do things. I think that companies can do things, and individuals can do things. Let me take the government. The government can definitely reduce regulation. It can do VAT on goods. That will ease pain. I know a lot of this is short term, but let's be honest, the pain is growing day by day. There are other things that I think that can happen. I think that the trading out. I think that I come back to the point of where investment needs to be placed isn't necessarily just putting it back into somebody's pocket. That doesn't drive innovation. And I think that putting investment into helping businesses trade out and do better with, and let's be honest, I'll say it again, we've come through the Brexit period. The reason we've done this is that we wanted to have independence on who we could trade with. So that's where I think definitely money can be placed, helping supply chains be a lot more efficient, reduce down the red tape, etc. There are lots more that the government can do, but those are a few. Then there's the companies. Companies could do a few things here. Yes, of course, they can offer pay increases, but not all companies can do that because they just don't have the cash. But one thing they can do, and here's a few things. A lot of companies typically, if you look at most people's contracts, have, certainly in commercial situations, at all levels, this is where what we're really talking about is not the elite. You've already sort of alluded to that. You're not talking about the top executives who earn millions of dollars. Yes, everybody's affected by this, but they're not as affected as much. It's the average worker that is affected. They all have incentive and bonus schemes. What they could do is that they've already apportioned and they've already planned for bonuses. They could start to aggregate and embed their bonuses into their monthly salaries. That would help. It's not going to solve all of the problems, but it could definitely help. The other side is that you could possibly even embed it within your basic salary. I've seen this with companies who've started to do this to help people. You're still effectively holding the same budget. The other thing you can do is you can then start to open up more incentives, again, the productivity side. So I think the business can definitely do a few things there just to help. On the individual side, maybe I think, again, this is where it's a case of, do you negotiate? And this is something that has been established. I think that some companies need to work and think better. The idea of saying to individuals in certain situations, in certain sectors with certain duties, they don't need to travel. Meaning that if that means that they can work from home, they're not having to pay the exhaustive, extremely expensive costs of travel, ticket, train fees, which are exorbitant. And one of the biggest hits, as we all know, is fuel. If people are traveling about having to travel to an office when they could easily work from home, that is going to save a lot of money. It also reduces the impact on the environment, folks. That's a side effect. But definitely that would save some outgoing costs. So there are things that both individuals and the companies can do to just help. But the one thing I will say is this. I agree with you, Cousin Pete, is that I think that the businesses need to take greater responsibility and think about, should top executives now be thinking about the money that they're gaining and where their incentives and bonus schemes can be put back into the workforce. And maybe the government themselves can sort of help with a little bit of legislation here in terms of what companies can and cannot do. And I don't want to stifle businesses, but I've already given you a few things that companies can think about. Now, I don't know whether you, from your side, Clergen Pete, what's your view on the idea of people working from home? It's culturally it works for some people, but it doesn't work for everyone. I mean, what's your view on what you've heard so far?
Well, I can see how working from home can work in certain situations. However, I'm coming up at this with my clergyman's hat on. For most people, they need real physical interaction with people, and they if they're not getting it at work, they'll need it somewhere else. So I think the people thrive more when they're able to interact in person. However, if it's better for the job, I think
exactly, it's not for everybody.
You've got to do that.
It's not going to be a blanket policy.
Yeah. So in that case, you need to get your social interaction outside of it, and that's where institutions such as the church step in. I think this is a whole cultural response. The church and other community groups need to step up as well to help support people. Not because it's not just financial problems. I mean, there's part of it is supplying food, and my churches have social supermarkets and stuff, but they have also things like a coffee bar and this sort of thing, where they create a community, a place for people to go and interact, which is not expensive. That's the sort of thing that community groups, including churches, should be doing to support people when work is getting them down.
I would say minimum wage is another thing that the government could look at, because the pain is happening at the lower end, and that's the other thing that I'm not saying that necessarily it's dramatically increased, but I'm just
asking, what do you think that should be done about minimum wage?
Well, I think it needs to be raised. Because I think that, again, the government at that lower strata can help people who can't afford, and this is where the key thing is. What we're looking at here is that some people cannot afford to just put the heating on or the lighting on, or even actually pay for food to feed their family, and that's one of the issues. So there are just a few mechanisms that they could put in. It doesn't have to be long term. What we're looking at is getting through this cycle. And I think that those levers that the government could consider today, we talked about the VAT and all the other things, but they would help enormously. Collectively, it would start to open up the economy a bit better. And at the moment, what I'm not seeing is action at that level. The government has the opportunity, has all these levers that it can pull, and I'm seeing things happening very slowly. Many business people I know can also do their own levers and pull things within their own company policy and within their own organizations. But to me, the government could definitely do a lot more. And I think that what we're now seeing is, if that government does not start, or the Conservative government does not start doing it now, come the next couple of months, you will see it getting worse. And there's a number of reasons. The weather is going to change. More people will need to put the heating on. What will also happen is goods are going to continue to happen. If they don't cut VAT or they don't cut red tape, supply chain costs are just going to continue to just grow and grow and grow. And when you go to the supermarkets, either some of the goods won't be there or they're going to be even more expensive.
Yes, okay. I mean, I would add one more thing. I don't know if you agree with this, then, Mark. Looking at the business scene, the measures that you're talking about are good humanitarian measures, humane things to do to help people through difficult times. But actually, the economic situation is pretty bleak, and we just have to be honest with ourselves.
Yes,
so we're going to go through tough times.
Yes, no, I agree with that, and I think that's one of the things that the vast majority of people need to recognise. We've now come to the dawn of reality, folks. Yeah, there may be a day when perhaps that surplus cash that gave you that holiday or that extra luxury goods was something that we enjoyed. It's just something now we need to think differently. And remember, and Clergyman Pete, we've seen that because we saw what happened in the 1970s.
Yeah,
people had to do that.
Yes.
People basically had to cut their cloth. They didn't like it, but they did it, and it was a necessity.
No, and this is looking at being worse than the 1970s. So people really need to be prepared.
Here's my final point on this, and I know it's a big subject. But whether you're the RMT, whether you're whoever, I know that people are complaining because costs are going up. Their money in their pocket is less because they can't use that money to buy things. Goods are going up. But a strike does not help. It doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help the economy, and other industries suffer. And so what that means is that it has a consequence and a knock-on effect. And I know they're doing it to try and elevate their position, but I think it's the wrong thing. And of course, collectively, if more and more unions in all sectors start to do it, we could be in a worse situation. So I think we have to look at it now where perhaps we need to sort of group together and start to think about it differently.
Yes, well, that's it for Mark and Pete for this week. You've got to tighten your belt. And, of course, add your comments. Go to markandpete.com. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe you have some solutions that we just haven't thought of. But that's it for Mark and Pete for this week. Catch you next time.